Welcome to Appreciating the Entrepreneurial Journey, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Cannon Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business success, and financial independence.
Hello and welcome to the show. Cannon Carr here, and with me is Gene Pursley. Gene is on our team at CornerCap and knows our guest today personally. So I'm going to let Gene introduce her, but our guest is a very successful entrepreneur who actually co-founded a consumer product company and product later in life. And you'll hear a lot about it. But Gene, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest today?
Thanks, Cannon. On our podcast today, we have Lou Childs, who is a co-founder of SlumberPod with her daughter, Katie Mallory. I can speak from personal experience as a mom of two young children. After sleepless nights and you're looking for a solution, you will do about everything. Well, SlumberPod came about just that way when Katie was visiting her mother, Lou, and after a sleepless night with the child coming out of the crib and popping back on, they thought this is a need for both parents, not only in this household, but other parents. I think you'll hear today with Lou of trying to find a solution that could be felt all across the nation, as well as a single mom who went back to school and found a solution that people will enjoy throughout many years to come.
Yes, it's an awesome program. You are going to get to hear all about that. And Gene, I love the fact that you can relate to this personally. And actually, I can too, but SlumberPod didn't exist at all at the time for my wife and I when we were young. But before we take you into the program, let me just point out three things just to keep in mind as you listen to it. The first one is listen how Lou and her daughter follow a deliberate process that helps them avoid some classic mistakes. And it's not that they didn't have challenges, but classic mistakes that entrepreneurs can make, and how it helped them hit the key milestones and ultimately accelerate their success. Secondly, I love and listen to this about how age is truly not a barrier to success. And Lou will talk us through that. And then finally, just listen to the Shark Tank experience. It is really cool to go behind the scenes to hear what going through the Shark Tank process is like. So sit back and enjoy this great episode with Lou Childs. Lou, thanks for joining us on the program. I thought we would start with maybe take us back right before SlumberPod. And, I know you were working for a couple larger companies. I know you were a mom to, I think, 6 kids. Take us back. Did you always see yourself being an entrepreneur or not? How did it get started?
It's a great question, Cannon. I never really saw myself as being an entrepreneur. I've always been a problem solver. I mean, with 6 kids, you naturally have to
Absolutely.
Prioritize time management, solve those problems quickly. In fact, it's funny, when my kids call with a problem, I've learned that I need to say, do you want me to try and fix it, or do you want me to just listen? And most of the time, they just want me to listen. But that was a hard lesson for me. But as a problem solver, naturally, it was easy for me to get into the entrepreneur world. I've got a lot more ideas, and people come to me with their ideas. I think they value my opinion on whether it's different than what's out there. Is it viable? Is it something that, if it were me, would I take it to market? So no, I didn't really envision that. And especially at 60 years old, launching a product, but I sure have enjoyed it. And it fit right in with everything else in my background. So a culmination of all the things I've done.
Well, and I know you did work for some larger companies. Was it odd to make that jump in terms of just lifestyle, in terms of what it meant from a business sense and confidence? Was that a hard transition to make?
Well, my last few jobs have been for smaller software companies. I was the marketing director, fintech mostly. So I brought software products to market. I have worked for large Fortune 200, 500 companies. I loved the experience there, but actually the smaller companies are what set me up for success because I wore so many different hats. Yes, making the leap to leave a secure job with benefits and, a paycheck that I knew was going to come in every other week to working for SlumberPod and really not having a secure feeling of what was going to happen. It was a risk, but I was all in 100%. So
it didn't, even though it was a risk, you knew it, and it didn't keep you awake at night. You were able to just jump in and
not at all. Between my daughter, who is the co-founder of SlumberPod, who really is the reason why we invented it, between the two of us, it was less of a risk for me. I'm up in age. I could probably find another job that paid my salary. She and her husband depended on their paychecks, and they had 3 small children, and it was a much bigger risk for her. So I was happy to do it, and really it worked out very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, take us back then to that moment when you did invent it, and I love this story. In a way, I think it was opportunistic, right? I think your daughter Katie was on maternity leave. I think you were in transition from a prior job anyway, so you both had time. Was that kind of the seed that allowed you on that one night, I think when Katie was visiting, to kind of come up with the vision of what SlumberPod was?
Well, the timing was very different, a little bit different than what you just described. The activities were the same, but it took us 2 years to really get serious about it, because when Katie came home and stayed with me, and they had to share a room with my then probably 18-month-old granddaughter, that happened at a time when we were both full-time and juggling a lot. And we said, oh, somebody needs to invent this. We should. But the timing wasn't right. But she then was pregnant and about to have twins 2 years later. I was laid off. I was laid off on a job, was sad for a minute. And then I called her up and I said, Katie, do you realize that I can come stay with you for maternity leave? And now we can get serious about this idea.
Oh,
and
that's great.
It fell into place. I'm telling you, the amazing timing of all of the different things on our journey is, we should write a book, honestly. It's been so incredible.
Yeah. Well, timing is everything. But at the same time, I think in some sense, like you said, you were laid off. You didn't mope about it, right? You're like, hey, you know what? We've got this idea that's been germinating. Let's jump in. How long did it take to get the product design right and feel like you were ultimately solving a problem that was going to meet demand in the marketplace?
Well, we had a pretty good idea. We had a good prototype, probably with some help, probably in about 5 months after we got serious. The first prototype was a bomb, but the second one, we went to a professional product development firm in Atlanta. Am I able to mention their name?
Oh, sure, if you want to.
Creature Product Development. They're near downtown Atlanta, and they helped us tremendously. We had a brainstorming session. We came up with a lot of different designs and eliminated all but 2. And they made those 2. And then from that, we chose what is today's SlumberPod design. But a baby product in and of itself is rather a beast to create. There are a lot of different safety tests, and of course there need to be. But starting out, we thought we would be to market a lot faster than we were. But not only is it the components that took some time, especially the fabric, to get that right, because it's not only blackout, but it is breathable too, and that's quite a unique combination. But getting that fabric, getting everything put together, and you have to give the entire box like it's about to be shipped to the safety testers. So we had to have everything perfect in order to submit for juvenile product safety certificate.
And that took about 5 months ultimately, right? Or
it probably took longer than that. To get the fabric right was probably about 5 months.
Yeah.
And so from idea to launch was 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then when you did launch, was that it just briefly, was that like online sales? Did you have some distribution, physical retail lined up?
We decided for marketing and hype to go the Kickstarter route. So we actually had 500 units ordered, almost delivered, and we launched a Kickstarter. So, a Kickstarter goes for a month or 30 days. And we had the units in our warehouse by the time the Kickstarter was over. So we could send those out. And we had 500 and we sold 450 during the Kickstarter. 9 times our goal. We were really pleased with it. And I was talking to someone yesterday on the phone who bought one of the early bird Kickstarter units. She still uses it. She's had 2 more children and still uses that original SlumberPod. So the longevity of these products is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was cool to talk to her yesterday that she's on her 3rd baby and still using SlumberPod daily, by the way.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so and you've kind of answered it, but when was that breakthrough moment? I mean, in a way, that first month validated completely, right? You're 9 times.
It absolutely did. People were like, oh my gosh, let me just throw money at you. This is amazing. And then we started getting influencers who were interested. And then we realized that our target audience was the same target audience that sleep consultants have. In fact, they teach that you should have your little one in a completely blackout environment for sleep. It helps with a lot of things like melatonin production and that sort of thing. But they sleep better that way. So we allowed their clients to take that blackout situation on the road. So they were proponents and ambassadors for us. And I mean, that was probably the best marketing situation we could have stumbled on. Still is to this day. One of the best marketing things.
Was it just you and Katie kind of working your networks to reach out to and get the influencers, or did you have like a small board of advisors? How was it working?
Yeah, it was just me and Katie. And Katie is in the target audience. So she had her friends talk about it. But honestly, the people who bought those first 500 started talking about it and tagging us and saying, oh my gosh, you've got to get one of these. It is amazing how much better my child slept on vacation. And before we launched, though, we did our due diligence. I've been in product launches before for, like I said, software and also insurance products, where you have beta testers and you have a focus group. And we sent out surveys to, hundreds of parents and caregivers about whether their child was a good sleeper at home. And if they were they a good sleeper when they traveled? And 75% of the ones that said their child slept well at home said that their child did not sleep well away from home. So we knew we were onto something that was a big need.
Yeah, that's great. Well, was there, so in hindsight, it sounded easy, right? But was there ever that moment where you're like, you hit like just a wall where you're like, we've got to get over this hurdle and we don't know how we're going to do it. And there's a major challenge, and you did work through it and got on the other side. I mean, was there ever that moment of, oh my gosh, we won't make it, or we're stuck?
I think the biggest hurdle we had was there really isn't a test for how blackout fabric is. Okay. There's a UV test, but there's not a gauge. Getting that fabric right every manufacturing run was a challenge. And we finally did come up with our own little homemade light box where we would lay the fabric over it and do a test with a photographer's light meter. So when the factory would send us a sample, then we were able to say, oh, how does this compare to the last run or for the very first run, which was fantastic. We did buy a lot of fabric that second run without knowing that it could be different. And we lost some money that way. So that took some wind out of our sails, that we don't have a way when it comes off the manufacturing floor of knowing, but we figured it out our own little way, and it worked.
Definitely. Well, you had 500 to start even in that first month. How did you fund that? Did Kickstarter help raise the funding for that as well? Or
no, we had the funding. Interestingly enough, when Katie and I got serious about this and I was helping her on maternity leave, Columbus, Georgia, where I lived at the time, had their very first product accelerator, entrepreneur accelerator group. It was through Startup Columbus as well as Troy State University at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in that class. I went twice a week. Katie sometimes dialed in remotely from Atlanta. We did the homework. It helped us to know at a high level what to do from product idea to launching a product.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that class, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks long. All the people in the class pitched to an auditorium full of people. Well, little did we know that there were interested investors in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And we were asked back, along with, I think, 7 other entrepreneurs, to a second round of pitches.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, we were the only ones to get funding. And we got Shark Tank money, let me tell you, from two investors in Columbus, Georgia. Without them, I don't know that we would have been able to do it.
Right.
So we had that money. It was a convertible note. We did convert it to equity before we went on to Shark Tank so that we could say we were debt free on the show.
That's great. I want to come back to the influencers too, but I've heard you talk in the past about how important just that network of, we call it an ecosystem, but a network of people who help you get started, right? And you mentioned those 2 investors with a convertible note from Columbus. I know friends and family were involved, product designers. Just tell us a little bit about how you all built that support network at the early stages.
It's a great question. And Katie is probably the biggest part of that. Mm-hmm. Katie has a huge network. Mm-hmm. She's a member of, or she started this Facebook group of marketing and communication women in Atlanta. And I think there are 20,000 or more members in that group, in that Facebook group. And it's very active.
And she did that before or at the time?
Oh, yeah. She did that before.
Yeah.
And then we also started a Facebook group for families that travel with little ones. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to listen to their problems and their questions. So that was really independent of SlumberPod, but we created that group as a listening ear for people who travel with small children. We also reached out to our network. If we had a question or a problem or we needed advice, we reached out to someone who we thought might know, or at least they might know who we needed to talk to. And I will tell you, in the entrepreneurial world, we have found that people are so giving of their time and advice. Mm-hmm. So we would have phone calls for hours with people just giving us their time for free.
Oh, that's great.
It was invaluable.
Like, fellow entrepreneurs or
that we had never met before.
Mm-hmm. Well, without giving a name, so who was most helpful at that time? Was it fellow entrepreneurs? Was it a good CPA? Was it a business attorney? Was it the designers that help you do product research? Maybe it's all the above, but
I would say it's all of the above. But the telephone calls with entrepreneurs were probably the most impactful for us where we were in startup.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who were some of the, and again, you don't have to give a specific name, but just that concept of the influencers, that sounded like really helped you accelerate visibility and sales. How did you think about the influencer side? Like what was the profile? What kind of people did you want?
So we felt like those sleep consultants were humongous influencers for us. And that really did pay off. One in particular, well, actually a couple, but when they would post, our sales would fly through the ceiling. And it was like, what is going on with sales? Somebody must have just posted about us. And we'd start digging and we would see that somebody shared us, and one of these amazing influencers would share us in their stories or have a post that included us, or they just added us to their products that they love page on their website and they wrote a blog about it. But a needle would shoot up on sales when they talked about us.
Was there any compensation for them to do that, or is it just truly they just love the product, or a little bit of both?
So we had 2 different compensation models. The affiliates who were sleep consultants had a discount code that they would share that would get their clients a certain dollar amount off of a SlumberPod. And for every redeemed discount code of theirs, they got a kickback. So, I mean, some got significant 2 times your house payment a month return if they were very influential and they posted about us a lot.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I just love you. In hindsight, you made it look easy. I know there's such hard work that you put in place there. Let's talk a little bit about Shark Tank. I mean, most entrepreneurs don't get to get that kind of visibility and go through that process. How helpful was it? But maybe even first and foremost, how did you get on the show? I know, and the odds are low, right? I know they get 50,000 applications each season, and maybe 1,000 get to at least get interviewed, and ultimately only like 50 or 100 actually even get invited to the show. So, how did you connect to Shark Tank? Why and how helpful was it?
Well, Katie and I have always been Shark Tank fanatics. So maybe deep down inside, I knew I was going to do this, but we have always watched the show, and I'm always just intrigued by the things that people bring on. So when I went to stay with her during her maternity leave, we binged on the show to see what things were important to the sharks, what kind of products they would bring on and that sort of thing. Once we had about 4 or 5 months of sales under our belt, and we also got on Amazon, we said, why not? Why don't we go? Because we knew we had to have some sales for us to turn their heads. And Katie and I both have a marketing and communication background, and we're a little kooky. So they love that too. So we decided to fly. We looked at all the different, and this was in person. It was before COVID. We decided to fly to Dallas. It was the second casting call they had for season 11. And we got up early and got in line, and they call everybody in line into this big auditorium and say, you're going to pitch. You've got a minute. We might ask questions. We might take pictures. We may smile and laugh, and you will likely never hear from us again. So, we thought this was fun. We pitched. I forgot my line. Katie was great. And they got inside SlumberPod, took pictures, asked questions. And they did mention, you will hear from us. If you do, it'll be 2 or 3 weeks. Well, that time went by. And I'm really not allowed to tell the details of the entire journey.
Sure.
But it was a lot of work, but we went on the show with pink pajamas and shark bedroom slippers and danced our way in. And I think I've really seen the clip,
by the way. I've watched it twice. It's awesome.
We really shocked them when they asked us about sales, and we had over 500,000 at that time and not in business a year yet. And then they took us seriously. It was a miracle, really, that we got on our first try. We tried really hard. We were fun on our videos that we would send in, and I think that helped a lot. They want somebody that's TV worthy.
Yeah. Well, you I don't know if you practiced a lot or if it's just innate and natural, but you were a natural show and handled it very well.
Well, thank you.
Well, and I got to ask too, there were things during the episode that obviously I wouldn't say went wrong, but I remember your grandson or whoever, I don't know if it was your grandson, started crying like crazy when you put him in SlumberPod. Were you like, oh my God, that just shot us, right?
And you only have one cut. You can't say, let's stop and use a doll.
So while you're pitching, he's crying in the SlumberPod. Were you like, oh my goodness, we're in trouble?
Yes. So that baby was actually who I was talking to about earlier. That baby was a customer that bought from the Kickstarter. Yeah. And she was so crazy about SlumberPod and so much fun. And she would post about us that we invited her to come out to California and air with us. Yeah. And we had never met her in person before. And Oscar slept in SlumberPod every day for his nap and every night. So he loves SlumberPod. But you got to admit that it had to be weird. It wasn't nap time. It was like 5:00 in the afternoon. So it wasn't bedtime either. Right. And here he is on a stage with a bunch of people on a set with a lot of lights and people staring at him and laughing at him. And we're going to cover him up. No, he wanted
Well,
nothing to do with
did
that.
did you? And I remember one of the sharks was like, "Oh, this looks complicated." He was holding up a bunch of the rods, and you were like, "No, actually, it's pretty easy. Put together. It takes 30 seconds, right?" But were those moments where like, "Oh my goodness, we're in trouble," or was it just fun, part of the experience, and you were pretty confident? You looked confident.
Well, thank you for that. I was getting a little nervous, actually. I don't know if you can see, but I was like wringing my hands at one
No.
point, and they loved catching my expressions. But we were in front of them for 50 minutes, and then they edited it down to 7. That's what you see on the show. So there were a lot of things that you didn't see that wasn't as TV worthy. But, it was funny when Mr. Wonderful called it Slumber Prison. And so we had a little giggle there. But all in all, it was a great segment because I feel like they respected us. 3 of the sharks told us that we really shouldn't take a deal, that we didn't need them. And then Barbara came back. I think Barbara really loves helping women, and she's interested in that. So all in all, I think we had a great time on SlumberPod and on Shark Tank.
Shark Tank.
And
what's the partnership with Barbara? I know you've probably talked about it publicly. I mean, did that give you what you needed to get to the next level?
Well, we couldn't say for after a year after our season was over, we weren't allowed to talk about it until that point, but the deal did not go through.
Oh, it didn't?
So,
I didn't know that.
No,
okay.
It did not go through, which now in hindsight, even then we thought that was fine because we love the exposure that Shark Tank gave us, and we love being able to say, as seen on Shark Tank. But fast forward a couple of years and we were acquired, and we didn't have to give Barbara her percentage. Really, it worked out.
They say sometimes just being on Shark Tank is validation enough, right? Even if you don't get funded, and just being able to say you were on Shark Tank. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So you ended up being sold, I think. What year was that? Just in the last year or two? Is that right?
Yes. April 22.
Was that always part of the plan? I often ask business owners, entrepreneurs, did you know when you started, did you know what the end would be in some broad way? And did you know, or did you have a plan, or and when along the journey did you say, we want to find the right exit?
We always knew that was our end game. We didn't think it would come quite as quickly as it did because we were in business for not quite 4 years when we were acquired. But we always knew that at some point in time I would want to retire. And Katie really enjoys working for large corporate. She wants to get back to that.
Is she still involved though with the
she is
the SlumberPod effort, right?
She is.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, that's wonderful. Well, congratulations on that. So, what a great accelerated journey. But you guys hit right time, right product. You designed it. It sounds like very quickly and smart for the market, and had things just line up the right way. And you guys sounded deliberate about how you researched the market. So, just well done there.
Thank you.
Just a little bit. Then you said you didn't plan to be an entrepreneur when you were your pre-SlumberPod life, but now you've been a successful entrepreneur. I often ask something like stubbornness and conviction, a virtue, and when do those get in the way, right? In other words, when do you know when you have to pivot? Walk us through a little bit about the mindset of an entrepreneur there. You got to have belief through the toughest times, and at the same time, you got to be flexible.
When we pitched in front of the investors in Columbus, Georgia, they said to us, we didn't even really have a prototype. It was falling apart and not a good design. But they told us later that it wasn't so much the product, but they believed in us. Katie and I are both really driven. We're tenacious, and I like to think that that's a good word. We love to learn, both of us, and we don't really like to take no for an answer. So, but I think we're very professional in pushing back. We don't burn bridges, or try not to ever. And even if we needed to call Barbara today, her team would be so great with us. Yeah. We have talked to them several times. So I guess, and to wrap that up, or to say that in a summary, I do feel like to be successful, you have to have grit. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to be just determined. And we both are. And it really helped. I can't think of a time that it was a bad attribute to be determined and tenacious. Maybe others in our network might say something different, but I feel like it's always worked for us. And it's really the secret to our success. I was raised in a home with no father. My dad died when I was 3, and my mother raised 5 children on her own, never remarried. So I have a strong female role model as a mother, and I feel like I've done the same thing for my children, and it really has paid off.
Well, I want to come back to that in just a moment. I love how, age doesn't define what you do, right? And the timing of what you do. And I love that part of the story. But I did want to ask, as you look back over that journey through SlumberPod, I think you've been pretty clear about the skills you had, right? Certainly the marketing acumen, the grit, just the vision, the ability to not take no for an answer and just being tenacious. When you look back at the combine you and Katie together, were there skills that were missing that you realized you needed someone else to fill in, or what did you learn about yourself in that process?
Yeah, of course. Well, great thing, even though Katie and I are both in marketing and communications, I'm more on the technology side, which is unusual for the older person to be that person. But Katie is more creative and the idea person. And I'm the make it happen, put it in a plan, more analytical. But yes, of course, there were things, especially when you talk about baby products in there. So we got a safety consultant. We got a liability attorney. We needed attorneys. Bookkeeping, we learned early on that was not our strong suit. So we hired an e-commerce bookkeeper. We also hired later a consultant to help us with product development. And then we actually hired a product development person. When we got acquired, we had 4 full-time employees.
Oh, really? That's it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it for, $11 million in sales.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And was there ever a time you're like, we're stretched too thin, or it was just the way you'd set it up? It worked.
Well, I'm sure there was a time when I called Katie and said, I really need you to come work for SlumberPod. And it just wasn't in the cards at that time. So we made it through. But you can ask my husband, there were some late nights and a lot of work but it paid off. It was 100% worth all of that. But yes, you've got to love what you do.
Yeah. How did you and Katie manage inevitable conflict? I mean, y'all seem to work together so well. I love the way, just seeing you on Shark Tank, y'all handled each other, interacted with each other so well. How did y'all handle conflict with each other?
Well, the great thing about working with mother-daughter or a very close family member is, their stress behaviors. And we don't try and make the other person go there.
We don't push each other's buttons.
We do not push each other's buttons. So right. I can only think of a couple of times that we really went sideways on something that we were trying to strategize or a plan. And it was probably late at night. We would meet every Sunday night those first 2 years and go over like what we did that week and what we needed to do the following week. We both said during those couple of times, hey, let's stop. Let's go get a good night's sleep. Let's come back tomorrow and talk about this. And typically we would see it differently the next day. So we put our love for each other before our egos. And it really worked. But honestly, she is my best friend or one of my best friends. And I think she would say the same thing about me. Yeah. We just have a wonderful relationship. And I'm so thankful and grateful.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's you've had an incredible journey together to share. It just enriches the experience. One other question, just going back a little bit, just on that journey, we don't have to get numbers into it, but on the funding side, did you ever have third-party capital? Were you self-funding it along the way? Just conceptually, how did you fund things in the life cycle?
Well, we took that nest egg, that initial seed money, and we just kept it growing. So we were self-funded. Everything that the business made, we put back into the business.
Mhm.
We did towards the end, because we're a little seasonal, or maybe a lot seasonal, we needed to start gearing up for the summer. We've
Mhm.
realized that, I think it was the summer of 2020, we would sell out as soon as it came in. So, in fact, it almost crashed our website in August of
Mhm.
2020. They sold out in 4 minutes, a whole container full. So we realized that we needed to beef up inventory and get a lot more stock. So we did get a loan from our bank at
Mhm.
that point to help with that. But
Mhm.
that's one thing that the acquiring company is able to do is they have a lot more money capital to put in towards a lot more inventory. And I doubt we'll ever run out, but could
How did you
happen.
know? Well, and so how did you know now was the right time to sell as opposed to waiting a little bit longer? Why not wait another 5 years, grow it even more?
Well, I think because I'm 65 and I really wanted to retire, and I knew Katie wasn't in a position or really wanting to run SlumberPod. She is a strategy person. I think the two of us together could have done a great job. I was ready. I was ready
Hmm.
to retire. My husband has had some health issues too, and
Okay.
there's no guarantee
Yeah.
on that. So the timing was perfect. It really
Well, and
was.
you've gotten a little time back now. I presume,
Mhm.
even with how many grandkids? 16? I think I forgot.
Yes,
So
16.
you're right. So you got a little time back to spend with them. Well, last just one or two questions. We talked a little bit about how age doesn't seem to define you. I remember you said I think you got your college degree maybe in your late 30s, and you didn't get a master's degree in your 50s. You started SlumberPod at 60. Most people do it a lot sooner than that, right?
Yeah.
What's your secret there? How do you not let age define what you're doing and just have the energy to always be present and ready?
Well, I just don't let what other people think really influence me.
Hmm.
So I understood from my mother, who had a college degree when my father died, how important that piece of paper is.
Hmm.
And she passed away when I was 26. Katie was a year old. And she made me promise her on her deathbed that I would get my degree. I was the only one of the five that didn't have it, because
Yeah.
I got married and started having children. I left college to do that. So
Hmm.
I went back when my husband and I divorced, and
Hmm.
I went back and got my degree, and I just fell in love with education all over again.
Yeah.
So I loved it. It was seriously a life changer. It gave me confidence beyond what I ever knew, and the sky was the limit after that.
Hmm.
I did things and had opportunities that I would have never had I not gone back to school.
Yeah.
So
That's wonderful.
I'm a big proponent whenever I hear of a single mom. In fact, I give towards a nonprofit in Atlanta that helps single moms go back to school.
Hmm.
And I talk about it all the time. If somebody will listen, I'll talk about it. It's never
Yeah.
too late. It is never
Wonderful
too late.
gift. Yeah.
Hmm.
Wonderful gift. Wonderful message. That's great. Well, it's so looking back, what you've shared some great insights and wisdom. So you've given advice, fellow entrepreneurs, and I know you've been doing that, through the years too. But what advice would you, looking back at yourself in your own 20s, back when you were 20 years old, what advice would you give yourself way back when, knowing what you know now, either about business or about, and you've alluded to the importance of the degree. Maybe that's the answer right there.
Well, that is part of the answer, but especially for women, I
Hmm.
think had someone talked to me when I was in high school and early college that you don't, and it's different now, but I'm 65 and that was 1975.
Yeah.
So in 1975, women weren't typically told that, hey, you can go to Georgia Tech and be an engineer, or
Hmm.
you can do computer science. Those were not typically jobs for women. And
Hmm.
I would say today, go with what really fills your bucket and what you're
Hmm.
really passionate about. And if I could go back to those years, I would take a different path.
Hmm. Awesome.
So yeah, don't
Well,
let your gender stop you from pursuing your dream.
yeah. Well, and it's such an inspiring message, and you've been in that interesting position too, of being single mom, starting a business. Any advice you give to single moms who are focused on raising a family, but do have that hope and dream of starting a business? Any advice you'd share with them?
Well, I would reach out to organizations that help. People probably don't know, and I am really having a moment here, and I can't remember the name of the nonprofit in Atlanta, but I'll get it to you so
Yeah.
you can add it. There are people that will help, and just asking questions. Go to the counselor's office at the college, find out about scholarships. I got a scholarship going back, and grant money and Pell Grants, and if there's a will, there's a way. I drove an hour both ways to go to Auburn University to get my degree. So there again, be tenacious, go after your dreams, listen to that thing in your head telling you you can't do it. You've got to change that message. And if you really want to do something, you can do it. You can make it happen. Just find out.
Well, you've shown that, you've
help.
lived that. Yeah, you're a great example of that. It's inspiring. I love it. Last question. If people do want to learn more about SlumberPod, where's the best place for them to go learn about it?
SlumberPod.com.
There you go.
SlumberPod.com.
Right. And I've been to the website, and I know it has everything you can need and all the accessories. It really is a wonderful, wonderful brand. And
we've got more products coming out. So stay tuned for some big announcements.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, Lou, thank you for joining us on the show. This has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate your time, your insights. Very valuable for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Welcome back. Cannon, Carr, and Gene Pursley here with you to kind of recap some of what we learned. Gene, I just thought this was an awesome episode, unique in many ways. They gave us some great insight into what, a single mom entrepreneur can do later in life, and just kind of a really wonderful accelerated journey. But before we get into summarizing kind of those key takeaways, I thought I'd just ask you, since you know Lou and brought her to the program, what struck you as most interesting, just big picture from this episode?
Thanks, Ken. I think I love so much about just the work ethic and just to the drive for it. I think also a lot of us think about, oh, I have this idea, but to really be like, here's an issue, we're going to find a solution and put the boots on the ground. You can just tell from how Lou speaks about it, how hard they worked to bring this to market. I also really love too of like, not letting anything define them, letting them be like, oh, well, we have to go through this product for 2 years, but we know that this is going to be something that young parents, especially moms, are yearning for. It's true what Lou said, that parents, especially moms, we network, we talk. If we find a solution for anything, especially in those first couple of years, we will speak from the mountaintops about it. So I think that's what I loved, is that a lot of what was, here's a problem, we're going to find a solution, and we know other parents need it, and we know that they'll gravitate to it.
I agree. I mean, I love how she was didn't plan to be an entrepreneur, but she said, because of all the problem-solving capabilities I developed as a mom, particularly as a single mom, and that she learned from her own mom, helped her actually have the confidence to lean in and actually launch this product in such a great way together with her daughter. So I agree with you. I think it's a great takeaway, and it classically grew out of necessity, right? The pain of dealing with a kid that can't go to sleep while you travel, and you've alluded to that, how that product has helped you as well. So, well, I love that big picture takeaway. I think you're exactly right. Okay, so before we jump into kind of the key takeaways from this episode, I did want to point out the charity and name the charity that Lou mentioned, because I know it's a powerful one, and it's one that she cares so much about, part of her own narrative. That charity is called Nana Grants, and it basically helps single moms go back to school and develop a rewarding career. And I think the formula is, childcare plus education equals economic mobility. So I thought that was neat. And Gene, maybe share a little bit about how that kind of mirrors who Lou is.
I think it shows a lot of Lou's and Katie's dedication for education, especially for single moms. And I think it shows that here was an opportunity that they want to give to other moms that are in the situation of, okay, we want you to be able to get your education, but also have that childcare opportunity. I think the fact that Katie did this in honor of her mom, Lou, is a huge testament to the relationship and their dedication to the next generation of single moms.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's just, and it mirrors Lou's own journey. So it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, we wanted to work that in. So now let's just jump into those 3 or 4 key takeaways from this episode. The first one is I thought, I was asking myself, what is the secret to such a smooth 4-year launch that they did, right? Why did they? I mean, I know there were challenges, but they actually pulled off 0 to 11 million in revenue in 4 years with a very successful sale that was the right timing for them. How did they do that? And I think the secret was they had an incredible ability to listen and learn, to adapt, and then have advisors help them to avoid classic mistakes that entrepreneurs do. So that listening and learning and adapting was key. So, and in that, they talked about how the process that they went through, right? And listening and learning. And I think the process that they followed helped them so much. They talked about developing a prototype. Took them 6 months. The first one was bad, but they got it. They within 6 months got it. They went through a product accelerator as part of the process where they got 2 seed investors, helped them with the safety tests. Then went through Kickstarter, which is a key validator. Then they targeted influencers to help them develop it. And then boom, 4 years later, they were successful there. So that process that they worked was so key. And also part of that was the ecosystem alongside them. They used Startup Columbus and Troy State University to connect them to investors. That ecosystem help. And in all these podcasts, we're always talking about how this ecosystem of advisors helps avoid mistakes, see around corners, and help success. They engage with a product development firm, which helped them professionalize their offer. I love the segment about the influencers with the sleep consultants, the use of the Facebook. Gene, you talked about how moms network, and I know dads do too, but moms I've seen it, right? They have this incredible ability to network. And the Facebook group they used with women and the travel group for small children helped them inform and build a product that worked. And then finally, the most important advisor group they had was other entrepreneurs. And Lou talked about how those entrepreneurs helped them really see around corners and learn fast. So all that was just magic. Gene, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that, or, you're welcome to introduce the next topic as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I also think a lot of it, Lou speaks about the timing. If it wasn't this timing that was going to happen, if it wasn't the timing of Katie's maternity leave, the timing of her, being laid off and all the chips just kind of falling. So I think it's a great lesson for other entrepreneurs of here's kind of your roadmap to make this success. Here's the roadmap that really would work for them. Yep. I also love too, is that Lou is honest about it, that age doesn't define you. I think sometimes, especially as women, we're like, oh, okay, we're moms now and we're this and we're always this other thing. But to be like, okay, I have an issue and I have the knowledge and the education that I can go back and try to solve this. And I think it's a great lesson for, especially, right now, young women that are coming out of college, like, oh, could I do this right now? Or could I maybe do it later in life? It doesn't define you. If you have a problem and you have the means to find a solution and the people you surround yourself with, I think it's a great lesson for young, middle-aged, older entrepreneurs to never say no, to continue to work hard for it. So
totally agree. And that's a great second point. Age doesn't define you. I mean, I loved how she got her college degree at 39 years old. Love how she got a master's degree, if I remember correctly, at 50 years old. And I love how she launched SlumberPod at 60 years old. That is not a typical path. And I love how age didn't matter. And that's an inspiration to so many of our listeners. I know that. So that's such a great point. I thought the third takeaway we might highlight is just something you alluded to earlier, is just the mother-daughter relationship itself and how they work so well together. And what I thought was cool was they created space for each other to be themselves, but yet they worked that process so well. And it was cool how they set up a call every Sunday night, every week for 2 years. And that's where they kind of would check in how they're doing, what they're working on. So it's not like they were talking every day. So they created space, but yet followed a regular call every Sunday night. I thought they knew their strengths and weaknesses so well. And they avoided pushing each other's buttons, right? Ego didn't get in the way. I mean, they knew what not to really upset each other on. So I think at the end of the day, they kept their eye on the prize, the end result, and succeeding there. So just a cool mother-daughter relationship. And I know, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one, Gene, as well.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to the foundation of their relationship, of they had that close personal relationship. They knew each other on such a personal level, but then also to transition into professional, of like they can have those hard conversations if necessary, but know that it's always for the end goal. And it just speaks volumes, I think, to the individuals they are, but also that the teamwork and the framework they had to build this company. I think it having that foundation already and knowing, hey, this is going to be, we're not going to pull and tug. We're not going to, this is your strength and this is my weakness. And we can, you know, basically balance each other out and say, okay, I'm going to step in because this is my area of expertise. And that takes a lot. I think one of the biggest things as you get older is understanding your weaknesses and acknowledging them. And to have that personal relationship already, then you add the professional component is wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. There's one other point too that just I wanted to make real quick as we wrap up. I loved the fact that they didn't try to do things perfectly, but they constantly learned and adapted. And the word she used as kind of the secret to success was tenacity. There were definitely times where they had some small mistakes or, the product wasn't perfect. I even remember on the Shark Tank episode when I watched it, there were a couple of just snafus during it. And I'd be like, oh my God, we just blew ourselves up. But you know what? Perfection is not what you need. What you need is to have, a process you're working and the tenacity to pull it off. And they did so well researching their market through influencers to develop, as you alluded to earlier, a product that solved a problem in the market. And they were so closely attuned to that they didn't need perfection. They just needed to work the process and hit those targets. So, I wanted to point that out as well. Well, Gene, thanks for joining me on wrapping this up. I thought this was just a wonderful episode, and I'm so thankful that you brought Lou to our program. And everyone, thanks for listening in, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to learn more about exit strategies for business owners? Visit cornercappodcast.com for a free copy of our ebook with everything you need to know to make a smooth transition out of your business. Tune back in next week for another episode.